Even after surviving storms on seas that swallowed whole ships, he never quite got used to the way silence settled in the desert, heavy, patient, almost listening. He stood near the hood of his truck, breath fogging as he checked the GPS screen on his phone for what felt like the 100th time. Beside him, rigid and alert, sat Ranger, his canine partner, a Belgian Malinois with amber eyes that saw straight through darkness. The dog lifted his head the moment the radio crackled. Jonathan placed a steady hand on Ranger's back as the message came through. Search grid updated. Last known location of Officer Martinez ping 2 miles east of your current position. Possible storage facility. You're the closest unit. Proceed with caution. Jonathan didn't need further instructions. Missing officers weren't just names on dispatch logs. They were people with families, with promises made at kitchen tables, with children who fell asleep believing their parents would always come home. He slid into the driver's seat, Ranger leaping in beside him, and started the engine. The headlights illuminated a plume of dust ahead. Ranger huffed, ears standing tall. He knew the mission had begun. The storage facility appeared in the distance as a row of metal silhouettes, each door locked, each unit silent. The place was so still it felt abandoned, the kind of spot where forgotten things stayed forgotten. Jonathan parked at the edge of the fence line and opened Ranger's door. The dog shot out like an arrow but halted instantly at Jonathan's command. Track, Jonathan whispered. Ranger lowered his nose to the ground and began weaving forward, tail stiff, moving with the intensity of a creature born for moments like this. Jonathan followed close behind with his weapon holstered but ready. The wind was light, good for scent. The moon was low, good for cover. The stakes were high, good for nothing except the weight Jonathan felt in his chest. Ranger led him straight to Unit 46. The dog froze, hackles rising. A growl simmered low in his throat. Jonathan scanned the perimeter and noticed something odd. The padlock was closed but the latch wasn't fully secured. Someone had tried to make it look locked but hadn't finished the job. Jonathan drew a deep breath, then gently slid the latch free. The metal door groaned as he lifted it. And there, in the dim glow of Jonathan's flashlight, was the missing officer. Officer Miguel Martinez lay tied to a chair, bruised, dehydrated, but alive. His uniform was torn, his badge missing, his lips cracked. The moment the light hit him, he flinched, squinting through pain before recognition softened his face. You found me," he whispered, voice barely audible. Jonathan holstered his gun, rushed forward, and dropped to his knees. Ranger eased up beside him, tail wagging gently as if greeting an old friend. Jonathan checked Martinez's pulse, weak but steady, then began cutting the bindings with a pocketknife. "Easy," Jonathan murmured. "You're safe now. We've got you." Martinez exhaled a shuddering breath, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. I didn't think anyone would come in time." Jonathan looked at the officer's face, dirty but hopeful, and remembered all the nights he had prayed for rescue that came just in time. "No one gets left behind," he said softly. "Not on my watch." But just as he reached the last knot, Ranger snapped upright again, barking once, sharp, urgent. Jonathan twisted just in time to see a figure darting behind the units. Without hesitation, Jonathan lifted Martinez into a recovery position and pointed at Ranger. "Guard." Ranger stayed close to the officer, while Jonathan stepped outside, scanning the shadows. Someone was still here, someone who had put Martinez in that unit and planned not to return. Jonathan moved through the rows, senses trained on every sound. But when he reached the far end, whoever had been there was gone. Tracks led to the outer fence, fresh ones, but the person had vanished into open desert. When Jonathan returned to Martinez, he found Ranger lying beside the officer, head resting gently near his arm as if offering comfort. Jonathan knelt beside them both. "You have a good partner," Martinez murmured, reaching weakly to stroke Ranger's fur. "The best," Jonathan said. And he meant it. It took another 20 minutes for backup to arrive. Paramedics rushed Martinez to the hospital, while Ranger rode quietly in the passenger seat beside Jonathan as they followed the convoy. The mission was technically finished, but Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside him, something deep, something long ignored. He and Ranger waited in the hospital hallway for what felt like hours. Jonathan watched nurses rush by, watched families embrace returning loved ones, watched doctors deliver both relief and heartbreak. He felt, more than ever, that life hinged on seconds, on choices, on tiny sparks of humanity that appeared in the darkest moments. When Martinez's wife arrived, pregnant, terrified, trembling, Jonathan felt his throat tighten. She ran past him toward the room, clutching her belly, whispering prayers. Ranger whimpered softly, sensing the heaviness of it all. Jonathan leaned back against the wall and slid a hand through his dog's fur. "You did good, buddy," he whispered. Ranger nudged his palm, eyes warm. Moments later, Martinez's wife burst from the room and lunged toward Jonathan. Before he could react, she wrapped her arms around him and sobbed into his vest. "Thank you," she cried. "Thank you for bringing him back, for bringing him back to us." Jonathan froze. It had been years since anyone held him like that, years since he let himself feel the impact of saving a life. He had built walls around his heart, seals had too. But in that moment, as this stranger clung to him with gratitude raw as an open wound, one of those walls cracked. He placed a steady hand on her back. "He's strong. He fought to stay alive. I'm just glad we got to him." But she pulled away, shaking her head. "No, you don't understand." She gestured to her stomach. "Our baby is due in 2 months. Miguel kept saying he had to stay alive so he could meet his son. He kept praying someone would find him. You answered those prayers." Jonathan felt his vision blur. He wasn't ready for that. He wasn't ready to feel this much. After she returned to the room, Jonathan sank into the hallway chair. For years, he had believed his purpose was tied to the battlefield, to missions that demanded sacrifice, silence, and unbreakable resolve. But here, in a small town hospital with fluorescent lights and family photos taped to bulletin boards, he realized something else: saving one life could change 1,000 others. The thought stayed with him as he walked outside with Ranger. The air felt different, lighter, warmer, like the world had shifted in a way only he and Ranger could understand. The next day, Jonathan went back to check on Martinez. The officer was awake, sitting propped against pillows, IV in his arm. His face was battered, but his eyes were bright. His wife sat beside him, holding his hand. When they saw Jonathan and Ranger appear in the doorway, they both smiled like they were seeing a miracle. "Come in," Martinez said, voice raspy but steady. "I've been waiting." Jonathan stepped inside, Ranger trotting calmly at his heel. Martinez reached out a hand. Jonathan clasped it gently, careful of the bruises. "You saved my life," Martinez said simply. "I'll never forget that." Jonathan shook his head. "You did the hard part. We just followed the trail." Martinez's wife leaned forward, smiling softly. "He wants to name our son after you." Jonathan blinked. "What?" Martinez nodded. "Jonathan, it means, gift from God. You've been that for me." Jonathan felt something inside him bend. Something heavy, something long endured. He grasped the bedrail to steady himself. He swallowed hard. "I'm honored, truly, but you don't owe me that." Martinez smiled weakly. "It's not about debt, it's about gratitude, and legacy. I want my son to grow up knowing the value of courage, loyalty, and kindness. You gave him the chance to have a father in his life. That's more than a name, it's a promise." Jonathan opened his mouth to speak, but emotion climbed too quickly in his throat. Ranger stepped forward and placed his paws on the bed, resting his head beside Martinez's hand. The officer chuckled softly and scratched behind the dog's ears. "Your partner here is something else," Martinez said warmly. "He's gotten me through every impossible moment I've ever faced," Jonathan replied, voice softer now. "He reminds me what I'm fighting for, even when I forget." For a while, no one said anything. The room filled with the quiet kind of peace that didn't need words. Martinez's wife rubbed her belly, smiling at the rhythmic movements inside. Jonathan watched, struck by the simple beauty of it: life growing, hope returning, love persevering. When he left the hospital again, the sun was rising. Golden light spilled across the parking lot, catching on Ranger's coat, turning him into a silhouette of strength and grace. Jonathan paused beside the truck and looked out at the horizon. He thought about all the missions he'd been on, the ones that left scars no doctor could treat. He thought about the weight he'd carried, the guilt he never spoke of, the friends he'd lost. He thought about how, for years, he believed his purpose was measured only by the man he was under fire. But yesterday, in a dusty storage unit, he realized he was wrong. Purpose could be found in the smallest action, in choosing to go 1 mile farther, in refusing to give up, in answering the quiet pleas of someone terrified they'd die unseen. That rescue had changed everything. Over the next weeks, Jonathan visited Martinez often. He helped the young officer regain strength, brought Ranger to offer comfort, shared stories that coaxed laughter from wounded ribs. Martinez healed faster than doctors expected, and every time he saw Jonathan walk through the door, a spark lit in his eyes. One afternoon, as Jonathan and Ranger arrived, they found a small group of officers gathered in the waiting room. When they spotted Jonathan, they applauded. Embarrassed, he tried to wave them off, but they insisted on shaking his hand, on thanking him, on expressing how his actions had inspired the entire department. After the crowd dispersed, the police chief pulled Jonathan aside. "We could use someone like you," she said plainly. "Your instincts, your heart, you're built for more than battlefields." Jonathan raised a brow. "You offering me a job? Offering you a new path," she replied. "One where you save lives without losing yourself. Think about it." He did think about it. For days. For nights spent lying awake with Ranger curled at his feet. For hours spent sitting on his porch, watching sunrises that looked different now, softer, more promising. Because somewhere between the desert search and Martinez's recovery, Jonathan realized something he had spent years avoiding. He was tired. Tired of violence. Tired of grief. Tired of pretending he didn't want more out of life than survival. And he also realized something else. He wanted to be the kind of man worth naming a child after. When Martinez was finally discharged, the entire department gathered to celebrate. Jonathan attended quietly, standing at the back with Ranger, not seeking attention but simply wanting to witness the joy he'd helped restore. Martinez spotted him instantly and motioned him forward. "You ready?" the officer asked, smiling proudly. "For what?" Jonathan asked, puzzled. Martinez's wife stepped forward, carrying a tiny box wrapped in blue ribbon. She pressed it into Jonathan's hands. "Open it." Inside was a silver dog tag engraved with one word, Jonathan. Martinez placed his hand on Jonathan's shoulder. "For our son," he said, "so that when he grows up, he knows the name of the man who taught his father what courage really looks like." Jonathan's breath trembled. He couldn't speak. He didn't need to. Ranger leaned against his leg, grounding him, reminding him that he wasn't alone. That night, Jonathan made his decision. He accepted the police chief's offer. He and Ranger joined the department as a specialized search and rescue unit, the first of its kind in the region. They trained officers, assisted in emergencies, and responded to calls that required precision and compassion. Jonathan discovered a new kind of purpose, one rooted not in conflict but in connection. He became someone families prayed would arrive, someone children hugged when he found their lost pets or wandering grandparents. Someone the community trusted without question. But nothing meant more to him than the day Martinez's wife gave birth. Jonathan stood in the hospital nursery, Ranger sitting obediently by the door. Through the glass, he saw Martinez holding a tiny baby wrapped in a soft blanket. When Martinez turned, he grinned and gestured for Jonathan to come inside. Jonathan stepped into the room, heart pounding. Martinez placed the newborn gently in Jonathan's arms. "This is Jonathan Martinez," he said softly. "Named after the man who gave him his father." Tears filled Jonathan's eyes. He had faced death without blinking, had fought battles that most never knew existed, yet nothing had ever broken him open like holding that child. He looked at Martinez, at his wife watching with teary pride, at Ranger sitting protectively at his feet, and he realized something true and profound. One act of compassion could echo for generations. One moment of selflessness could rewrite a future. One rescue could change everything, not just for the one saved, but for the one who did the saving. And in that small hospital room, surrounded by life and hope and gratitude, Jonathan understood that the world wasn't healed by heroes who never broke. It was healed by people who kept choosing kindness, even after being broken. He brushed a gentle thumb across the baby's tiny hand and whispered, "You're going to have a good life, little one. Your father fought for it." As the baby curled his fingers around Jonathan's thumb, something settled at last inside the seal's heart, a peace he had never known. And with Ranger by his side, he promised silently to spend the rest of his days earning the name that little boy would carry. Not through medals, not through battles, but through compassion, courage, and the simple, extraordinary act of showing up when someone needed him. Because sometimes, saving one life doesn't just change theirs. It changes yours, too. And that, Jonathan realized, was the greatest mission he had ever completed.